Is there anything you miss from going into the office 5 days a week?
I absolutely miss Pizza Friday, which has now become Pizza Wednesday, but it is simply not the same because it felt like a reward for working from 9 to 5, 5 days a week, and it would arrive at the very end of that and everybody would indulge together having shared that experience.
Pizza Wednesday merely taunts you. Heather, is there anything you miss?
I don't know about miss, but I was definitely the person who got told by the managing editor of the Washington Post it was time to go home now. I was often the last person in the office.
You miss the sweet, sweet ritual of turning off the lights here in the Washington Post.
I was very friendly with the night crew and the cleaning staff, yes.
This is Impromptu from Washington Post Opinions, a show that brings you conversations about the news we can't stop thinking about. I'm Drew Goins, author of the Today's Opinions newsletter.
And I'm Molly Roberts, a columnist at The Post. This week, we're talking about returning to the office. 5 years ago, the pandemic sent workers home to figure out how to do their jobs remotely. It was weird until it very much wasn't. But now, a slew of companies, including places like Goldman Sachs, AT&T, Dell, and yes, our very own Washington Post, are calling people to come back to the office 5 days a week. And not to be outdone, President Trump has issued an executive order telling an estimated 1 million plus federal employees to do the same.
But the ability to work from home, at least, some of the time, has reshaped so many patterns. It disrupted downtowns and changed where people choose to live. It also shifted how everybody balances their work and home lives. So after 5 years of not really going into the office all that much, for some of us, can we really go back? We left the studio last week and accidentally turned the lights off and just locked Heather inside. So she is back to join us. I'm just kidding. Heather is joining us on the podcast from her home.
I'm Heather Long, still an economic columnist, and I have fallen in love with hybrid work, where you're in the office 2-3 days a week and then at home the other days. I call it hybrid work is like the Mr. Darcy of middle age. It is wonderful.
Why? I'm sorry, I have to. Why is it the Mr. Darcy of middle age?
Well, I just mean it's something very beautiful.
So why is this shift happening now? Why have some companies decided, finally, that having offices full of employees is better for them?
Oh, it's a loaded question, but I would say, unfortunately, 2025 is the year of, quote, operational efficiency. And that's corporate speak for save money at all costs. Mm-hmm. And how do you save money? The easiest way is to get people to quit. And one of these return to office mandates, particularly the 5-day-a-week in office mandates, we have a lot of data on this now, and it shows people will quit, and you don't even have to pay them severance to do it.
So it's not about productivity for the people who are in the office then, you think? It's more about just cutting down on the size of the workforce generally?
I do think so. There has been a decent amount of research so far on fully remote, hybrid, and fully in office. And it's kind of a mixed bag for fully remote. And that's why I think if you look at the Fortune 500, only about 16 companies are fully remote. But a lot of them are hybrid. And the reason that so much companies are hybrid is because that's the sweet spot. There is no productivity difference between the hybrid schedule and fully in the office 5 days a week. But what you do see a big difference is employee satisfaction and happiness and employee retention. So if you are really happy with your workforce and you want to keep those high performers staying at your company, what do? You offer them the chance to continue to work from home. And so I think my big fear is for whether it's the federal government that's going to do these 5-day-a-week return to the office policy, or whether it's all these different companies, is who are the first people to leave in these scenarios? It's star employees who know they can get a job elsewhere. And unfortunately, it's a lot of women.
Heather, you have come out with some, very strong words that I think all of us kind of have in the back of our brains when we're hearing this stuff about, oh, it's for morale, oh, it's for productivity. Do you think there's any truth to that, even as an auxiliary element, or should we, raise an eyebrow at every company that is enforcing 5-day back to work, return to office mandates? Is it in every case an instance of attrition.
I mean, yeah, I think in journalism, we know we can never say 100% surety
Sure.
on most things. But I think if what we're talking about is places that have been able to do work from home successfully for the past several years, why are they suddenly in 2025 saying the whole world has changed and we need to come back to the office 5 days a week?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you should definitely be skeptical. There's been a huge shift in the job market, right?
Mm-hmm.
The hiring rate in America, so the amount of people getting hired month to month, is really low right now. So even though we have a low unemployment rate, not a lot of people are getting laid off, we have a very low hiring rate. And employers know this, right? They know that suddenly they have a lot more leverage over employees than they did, certainly in 2022 at the height of the Great Resignation, when close to 50 million Americans were quitting their job and saying, peace out. I don't like your policies anymore. I'm going to go cook my lunch somewhere else.
Once again, Heather comes armed with data and I come armed only with vibes. But I wonder if there isn't something else going on that just made this moment inevitable to come whenever it would come. I mean, The Office plays a pretty big role in our collective culture. There was literally a whole sitcom devoted to it for years that people loved because they identified with that scene very separate from your home life.
Wait, which sitcom?
I don't remember the name right now, but
something office-like.
But in any case, I think that there is a sense, at least among some people, that of course we're supposed to be in the office, that is what working is. So we were disrupted by this pandemic, but that was unnatural. And the natural way of things, the way things have been for hundreds of years, is that we all collect to work in the same place. So, of course, it seems that the executives are more nostalgic, perhaps, than the everyday workers. But I think if you're feeling like, man, things aren't going great in the office that I'm running right now, I miss the good old days. It's a sort of imagined solution to a problem that makes people feel like, oh, if we just go back to everybody coming in, maybe things will be better.
So there is research, there is data to back up your vibes there, which is there's a huge
thank God.
huge perception difference between what managers, particularly senior leaders in an organization, how effective they think an office is versus what the rank and file people think. The rank and file people tend to prefer hybrid because they don't want their time wasted, right? What's the worst feeling in the world? You spend 45 minutes to an hour commuting into the office, and then if there are no meetings or there are no research collaborations, and you're literally just sitting there typing away, and there's more people around you to bug you and interrupt you, a lot of people get frustrated because they're actually not going to get as much work done as they would have if they were at home.
Right.
I will say just one thing I got to drop in there, which is keep an eye on NVIDIA. We're talking the hottest company on the planet, the AI king.
This sounds like Mad Money all of a sudden.
Yeah. Or did we go to a commercial break? Or?
But the thing with NVIDIA is they're one of the few companies that's fully remote. Mm-hmm. They're the company everybody wants to work for, and they work really hard. I mean, read the Reddit forums. People there are, doing groundbreaking work that's changing the world, and most of their workforce is fully remote.
It's interesting to see now unions at various workplaces that have them arguing for remote work as part of their negotiations as if it's a benefit, like a 401k. And that brings me to some data that I do have. Thank you to our producers. There's a survey that just came out from Harvard Business School that found that 40% of people would trade 5% or more of their salaries to work from home. And I'm curious what you guys think of that.
I would. If I were in a position where I have to go in 5 days a week, I would for sure trade a 20th, I suppose, of my salary. I might even go higher. I'm not ready to negotiate against myself in recorded form for my bosses to listen to. But
okay, 10%.
Yeah, great. 12. Yeah, I mean, yes, sign me up, Heather.
The bottom line is correct. This is worth thousands of dollars to a lot of Americans, this ability to work from home. And what's interesting is, and even at companies that have these very rigid 5-day-a-week mandates, it's often the superstar employees who are given given a grace period on that, or given a chance to still work from home at least Monday and Friday, let's say. So there's a real value here on both sides, and everybody recognizes that.
I wonder how much of it is a quality of life thing, just valuing your quality of life at X amount of dollars, and how much of it is an actual dollars thing. Say you're paying for childcare or for your dog to go play with other dogs, however many days a week you're in the office, just a hypothetical. It also seems like one of the main reasons so many people like working remotely is just the flexibility. Juggling everything going on in our lives is a lot easier when we can set the rhythm ourselves. That might not seem like it matters to a company, but do you think there's any extent to which, if we're more balanced, less stressed, dare I say, happier people, we can be better employees and then bring more value to our companies too?
Yeah, I think so. There's also quantifiable data that show that particularly parents, the childcare issues are real. Childcare daycares you often have to pick up by 5:30, or you get charged $50 for every couple of minutes you're late. And so there is a real tangible cost, and you can definitely see that a lot of people with kids are the ones who would take even more of a pay cut in order to be able to have that flexibility.
So is what you were saying there about childcare one of the main reasons, or the main reason, that it's more likely that women will leave if these policies change?
Unfortunately, yes. And I mean, it's particularly sad for me, and really lament that this is happening, particularly at tech companies where women are leaving, because we just had this huge surge. In August of last year, we had a record prime age women's labor force participation, the highest we've ever had in US history. Nearly 80% of women between the ages of 25 and 54 were in the workforce. And a lot of that was due to more flexibility in, companies really trying to go out of their way to figure out ways that they could accommodate and work with women. And I don't mean like totally changing everything, but just doing these little, okay, you want to work from home on Friday, or there's a snow day, like you can come in a little later. And a lot of that is rolling back now. And I think it could be really detrimental to the gains we've seen finally of women in the workforce.
I want to get more into some of those societal shifts and which ones will or can be reversed and which ones won't be or can't be. But first, let's take a quick break.
Welcome back. I'm Molly Roberts, and I'm here with Drew Goins and Heather Long talking about returning to the office. Heather, you've done a lot of reporting on downtowns in the aftermath of the massive remote work shift. Lots of companies have given up leases or downsized their office space in the last 5 years. Restaurants and other businesses in many downtown areas have suffered. All the food trucks outside the Post went away.
No.
So what now? What should we expect in places where this trend is reversing? Will the food trucks come back?
We'll see. It's a really good way to know what's going on, is just to look and see if the food trucks came back. I noticed last summer one food truck came back. There used to be about 7 or 8 outside of the Washington Post. So
a natural monopoly.
Yeah. But it's interesting you mentioned food trucks, because in some ways, if people came back just a couple of days a week, it's a lot easier for a food truck to help and address those people, right? Because a food truck can drive in Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday and be there to serve all the workers. Versus if you're running an actual storefront, I've talked to a lot of those storefront owners. It's really hard when you have tons of people there on Wednesday at lunch and then no one there on Friday. So the bigger picture for cities, and we've written a lot about this, is you really need to move away from and having a predominantly office environment downtown. So DC has an extreme example of this, where the downtown DC was close to 90% office space. And that's just not healthy anymore for any city. Almost across the country, every city's trying to become more mixed use.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that you do that is you want to start with people up in the morning walking their dog because they live there. And then you transition to some people coming in to work, and then you have more people walking their dog as they get home after work. And then you have people who are going to dinner, either staying in the after a long day at work or people who live around the corner from the restaurant. You want that more diversity of types of people and why they're downtown.
Yeah. As I was thinking about this downtown reinvigoration element, I was kind of framing the whole return to office situation as zero sum, right? Where if your coffee shop at the office is losing out on business, well, that means that probably the coffee shop near your house in your cute little neighborhood 30 minutes from the downtown core is gaining your business, and vice versa, of course. But if you can create a downtown that, really is its own neighborhood and has its own life outside of the office, I suppose that becomes much less of a contention.
Exactly. And a lot of cities are trying to do that. Washington, D.C. has been a good example of one that is really trying. They've done some innovative tax breaks, some innovative zoning policy changes and they actually are. Washington, D.C. is one of the conversion capitals of America of converting offices into apartments. And there's actually plans. I think that's going to happen more. We've seen previews of plans, certainly from the Trump administration, that they want to unload some more federal office buildings and what's going to happen to those. And, there's one part of you that's like, oh no, we're losing all of that. But there's another part that's like, yeah, that's people are going to want to live there. People want to go to school there. There's really exciting opportunities to transform these neighborhoods.
So I guess the best case scenario is you have a vibrant downtown, and then you have little mini vibrant downtowns in various neighborhoods. And it sounds nice. I just wonder whether it's really going to happen. And I guess to me, the kind of downtown feels like a very different space than the neighborhood ones, because it's where people who are from different neighborhoods, different walks of life come and congregate. And also, Heather, you probably have more information on this than I do, but I would imagine having a particularly robust downtown results in less crime in those areas. I mean, you don't want, a complete dead zone after dark. You want happy hours in addition to lots of people going to the sandwich place for lunch every day. So if there's a way to make both vibrant, great. But if there's not, I remain concerned about the future of the areas that we traditionally consider downtowns.
I want to add one thing about, the zero-sum thinking, which is to caveat that in these instances where companies are trying to get employees to quit, it is not a zero-sum situation. It is a negative-sum situation. If the return to office mandate is instated and an employee is not coming in 5 days a week because they've been shooed out the door, that downtown coffee shop is not getting any business either. There's no winning in that attrition war. But one other thing that I was thinking about is there are, an increasing number of people over the last years who chose not to live downtown or even close to downtown, but much farther out because commuting wasn't a concern. They could get a place out in the country, or, they moved with a significant other across the world, as I did. I left Washington, D.C. and moved to Honolulu and spent 2 years there, and now have moved back to Washington, D.C., as the Washington Post considers.
To all of our dismay.
Some people move to places where it's cheaper, move to be with family, just moved for a sense of adventure sometimes. And, some of those are easier for an employer to look at and say, okay, you need to come back to the office. And some of them are, much harder to say, well, you need to uproot your life now.
I think you're right. It's particularly hard when the housing costs have spiked. Talking about how both home and rental prices in these high cost of living cities have spiked 40% since the pandemic. And so the reason that a lot of people moved out, some was like you, Drew, where there was a family need or a partner need, but a lot of it was people in search of cheaper housing, and of getting more for their money. And so people are living, it's more of an hour commute instead of a 20-minute commute just to get into the office. And you're right, that's been a real shock. And that's why there's a lot of resistance to what's going on, even though they still live, technically in the DC or the New York City or the San Francisco or whatever metro area.
I guess as far as people who move farther away, I've heard a lot about places like Boise, for example, being really popular because lower cost of living, and maybe some folks prefer a slightly smaller town environment. I don't mean that as a knock on Boise. I understand that it is a city, but a smaller town environment than New York, for example. If folks start getting called back to DC, to New York, is that bad for places like Boise? Do you think that the growth of smaller cities across the nation could be reversing with these policies changing?
Yeah, I think we could definitely see some of that. You can see Boise is a great example. It's one of the fastest growing home prices in the entire United States. It's Idaho, Montana, and the Phoenix area, plus some places in Texas and Florida that are off the charts in terms of the growth in population and the growth in home values. It's been a bit of a mixed bag. Obviously, people who lived in these places before the big work from home surge came are not very happy that everything suddenly overnight costs double in their home. So it may even out a little bit if a couple of people do end up leaving some of these places. But you're right. It's a lot of upheaval. I will say though, I'm going to be very interested how many truly go to 5-day a week. Yeah,
Sure.
there's been a lot of publicity in the headlines about that. But again, if you look right now, about 60% of major companies are hybrid. So I just have a hard time imagining how low does that go? How many people really, really, truly enforce 5-day a week? I mean, are they really going to fire a ton of people over this? I think the jury's still out.
Right. When you talk about the need for downtowns to transform into places where people work as well as places where people live, you are kind of assuming that to a certain extent you can't, as I think you put it, Drew, at some point, put the toothpaste back in the tube. We may not be giving up the office as a cultural institution, or, oh, that was the name of the sitcom. Entirely.
The Office as a Cultural Institution.
Well,
Starring...
that was the subhead, I think. I guess I'm curious what your guys' feeling about that is. I mean, are we too far gone from the 5-day work week to really get back to it as a society, even if some big name companies are trying to make that happen?
I would say the way I think about it, both for downtowns and for office culture, is we're in the era of events. People are willing to come to the office or to a downtown if something is special. You know, there's the big weekly meeting, or there's a special gathering where you're going to have a brainstorming 2-day retreat sort of thing going on. You know, it's this event mentality. And you see the same with downtowns, that actually there are still a lot of people downtown. They're just not there to work from 9 to 5. They're there because they want to go to the big sports rally, or because they want to do yoga on the park with a bunch of other people. They want that special event night feel. And even when I talked to restaurant owners, they were like, this place is packed for salsa night or for drag queen story hour or whatever, whatever that is. And whereas people don't want mundane happy hour anymore. And I think that's how I think about it in the office too. They do want to be there for those special moments of team bonding, where they feel like there's real interaction going on.
Well, there you have it, Drew. If we prepare a 5-course meal for the entire office with the very best microgreens and individual creme brulees for dessert, everybody will be clamoring to return and work with us in person.
Then we can all go to the drag queen salsa rally afterward. On that note, we're going to wrap up this episode. It was great talking to both of you.
You too, from near and from far.
Thanks for letting me be remote.
This episode was produced by Hadley Robinson, edited by Damir Marusic, Chris Selentrop, and Allison Michaels, and mixed by Emma Munger. Special thanks to Millie Mitra and Deirdre Byrne. Thanks for listening to Impromptu. Please send us your thoughts about remote work. Email impromptu@washpost.com. And if you're enjoying the show, please be sure to follow us on your favorite podcast app.